So I'm here to learn about mergers and Kai-Uwe's views about mergers. I will refrain from asking personal questions and how I should organize the furniture in the office, not to say the meetings. So let me start also with something which is a little bit more general and perhaps slightly provocative, which is are we perhaps not strict enough with horizontal mergers? So let me explain a little bit what I mean by that. So I'm teaching my students, and we are teaching students in general, that when you have horizontal mergers, these horizontal mergers are increasing market power unless you have efficiency gains. And then, if the industry is very concentrated, you need quite a lot of efficiency gains in order to balance this market power effect. So from the point of view of theory, the a priori, without knowing anything, it should be that, the mergers, unless you really have lots of efficiency gains, are not necessarily welfare beneficial. That's from the theory point of view. On the empirical side, we start to see some literature on, which is, on merger retrospectives, as John Quokka, for instance, calls them, or ex post assessments, which is probably the way in which we would call them in Europe, which points to the fact that there are lots of mergers which are being cleared by the agencies. At least in the US, we have some evidence about that, this meta-analysis that John Quokka is doing, that these mergers are, which are accepted turn out to be increasing prices. And today also we have seen some evidence also from the work of the Federal Trade Commission, which was presented by Daniel Hosken. So the first question is, so are we doing right with mergers, or perhaps are we been too lax?
Let me say the following. I don't actually typically like the question of saying, are we generally too tough or are we generally too soft? I think the real question is, are we taking the right decisions? The Quokka work does concern me because it does suggest that there may be biases in the direction of being too soft under some circumstances. But the Quokka work also suggests that we're getting the intervention rate just about right, but that we might have to think very hard about being right on remedies, and maybe in some circumstances that we might have to go all the way to a prohibition where we're trying to avoid that in some other cases. But let me say what I think we've been trying to do, and where I think economics has been working, not so much in kind of generally saying we're too tough or not tough enough, but asking the questions, are there certain biases that might go in that direction in ways that we've treated mergers? And I think one of the biases that I saw, and where we had a recent decision that worked somewhat against this, was in the treatment of excess capacity in homogeneous goods industries. There was a fairly standard argument that went to say, look, if you have excess capacity, there are competitors out there that can expand their production in response to the merger, therefore there's no problem. And then mergers would go through. I remember one merger on which I was conflicted very early on, in which that seemed to play a role in the final decision. And in the recent Outokumpu-Inoxum merger, I think we very much made a point that just the ability to expand because of excess capacity doesn't mean that the prices aren't going up. That the consolidation of excess capacity is actually something that's very important in order to maintain market power. And in that merger, it was a merger to over 50%, both in market share and capacity. And despite the excess capacity on the other side of the market, we did some back of the envelope, in a sense. I mean, a simulation exercise that tried to work out with a lot of sensitivity analysis what the incentives would be there. And all it was suggesting was that there could still be fairly large incentives to raise prices. I think things like that are attempts to balance in the right direction. And I think the direction merger policy has gone with the greater influence of economics is that you're seeing both those cases in which we're tougher, but also other cases in which we have very high market share and after careful analysis of the market say there's no problem. So I think the tight relationship that you've shown between market share and intervention is somewhat loosening up as we're getting more sophisticated about the analysis. And I think that should be the goal rather than saying being tough or not so tough.